Donald Trump calling today for, quote, extreme vetting of would-be immigrants. Lots of tough talk, but short on specifics. Here to discuss now, Bernard Kerik is a former New York City police commissioner, and Harris Safar is the author of Demystifying Islam, Tackling the Tough Questions. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on. Today, Donald Trump revealed his ideas for combating radical Islam. Let's listen.
The common thread linking the major Islamic terrorist attacks that have recently occurred on our soil, 9/11, the Fort Hood shooting, the Boston bombing, the San Bernardino attack, the Orlando attack, is that they have involved immigrants or the children of immigrants. The time is overdue to develop a new screening test for the threats we face today. I call it extreme vetting. In addition to screening out all members of the sympathizers of terrorist groups, we must also screen out any who have hostile attitudes toward our country or its principles, or who believe that Sharia law should supplant American law.
I want to start with you, Mr. Kerik. From a law enforcement standpoint, how realistic is it when you listen to his plan?
Well, I think it's realistic if you have the manpower and the resources. But you also have to have relationships abroad, like with Syria, for example. We're bringing in Syrian refugees. We don't have the ability to have contact with their embassies. We don't know where they're coming from. You have the FBI director, the CIA director, and the DHS secretary, all three of which have said the vetting probabilities and possibilities for vetting Syrian refugees right now are almost impossible. That's a bad thing. And I don't care if it's Syrian refugees. I don't care who it is. Anybody that comes into this country, we allow to come into this country, should be vetted intensely to ensure that they're not going to harm this country.
We are a country, though, for the most part, of immigrants, of children of immigrants. So don't you think in some ways having relationships with immigrants or being just who we are, that doesn't help us as a country? That doesn't keep us safer as a country?
No, it does. But don't let the wrong people in. It's a pretty simplistic thing.
All right. What's your reaction to, and what's the reaction from Muslims that you're speaking to about Donald Trump's plan?
We see Donald Trump as continuing to implement or say some things that are really profoundly ignorant and spreading bigotry by fanning the flames of mistrust and even fear of Islam and Muslims. And he talks about immigrants in general, but really it was specifically focused on Islam, on Muslims, on Sharia. And when people hear terms that they don't really even know, then it is bound to create misunderstanding. So we invite Americans to understand Islam. When we started the True Islam campaign, it was all about go to trueislam.com, find out what Islam is and what extremism is. We're against extremism. And here are the 11 principles that we think can actually enhance our national security and protect this nation from
Do you think there should be stronger vetting along the lines that Donald Trump expressed today?
Absolutely. As a member of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, our international leader, the Khalifa, has always said that we have a responsibility to take care of the refugees, a moral responsibility, but to ensure that ISIS and their sympathizers don't sneak into the country under the guise of being a refugee. So we should absolutely have a vetting process to make sure that we're safe while also taking care of our responsibilities of helping refugees escaping warfare.
I want to ask you about Sharia law because I'm going to ask this for Bernie. Donald Trump citing Muslims who want Sharia law over American law, and this is according to Pew. I want to read this here. It says, just under 1% of the U.S. adult population is Muslim. From what you know about the Muslim community at large here in the U.S., do they want Sharia law here in the United States, from what you know?
You know what? Some say they do. Some Muslims I know say they do. They support it. They would support it. Is that the case? You know, personally, I don't think so. Sharia law, and Zafar can talk more about this than I can, that's the legal system for the Muslim community. Saudi Arabia is run by Sharia law. Are we ever going to have that in this country? No. It goes completely against the Constitution. So,
Harris, what do you think? Do Muslims in this country want Sharia law?
Well, because there's no monolith, I can't say for certain for all 100% of them. There's a minority that talk about Sharia law as a system of government, but the vast majority understand that that's not what Sharia is meant to be. There's a reason why we widely condemn the governments of Saudi Arabia, of Afghanistan, of Sudan, is because they try to legislate religion, which is not what Islam calls for, which is why one of the principles on trueislam.com is that Islam calls for a separation of religion and state. So all of these countries have gotten it wrong. The Prophet Muhammad said, you keep them separate completely. And he had a pluralistic society. He allowed Jews and Muslims and pagans to live in peace with one another. He didn't impose Islamic law on them. But then there's other things that people call Sharia. Stoning women to death, that's not part of Sharia. It's not mentioned in the Quran at all. And that's why the Khalifa of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community has been so vocal at condemning the Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia and other Muslim leaders that call for these things. So I think it's important to hear these Muslim voices to talk about, well, there's a nuance here, and there are Muslims that are on our side to try to defend this nation and the world from peace.
Let's listen to another portion of Donald Trump's speech today.
One of my first acts as president will be to establish a commission on radical Islam, which will include reformist voices in the Muslim community. The goal of the commission will be to identify and explain to the American public the core convictions and beliefs of radical Islam. This commission will be used to develop new protocols for local police officers, federal investigators, and immigration screeners.
A commission with Muslims, good idea?
I think, yes, a commission with Muslims is a great idea. You need to see Muslims as a part of the solution, not part of the problem. Now, you have to have the nuanced conversation. You have to understand what these principles even mean. And yes, I'm all for the things he's talking about increasing our security, working with Muslims. But if it's just about protecting America from Muslims, a certain type of Muslims, then we're really spending a lot of money and resources on a small problem. What about the greater number of deaths at the hands of gun violence? What are we going to do about that?
Thank you both. I appreciate it. Coming up, the latest on the deadly floods in Louisiana that have forced thousands of people to flee their homes.